Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to T-Mice Podcast presented by 321. I'm your host, Daniel.
I'm Ryan.
And I am Jeff. I just moved recently, and so I'm kind of getting adjusted to the new traffic pattern from my new place versus where I used to live. And nearly got ran off the road like 2 or 3 times today, despite the fact that there's clearly indicated bike lanes.
Well, I think that's all traffic right now, just because school's back. I'm seeing that, right? So there's a cutoff date. Like during the summer, I can breeze home and come to work pretty quickly.
Yeah.
At like beginning of August, mid-August, when Florida school starts, for some reason traffic is horrible. And I don't know about biking downtown to work, but I feel it might be similar because the schools near you.
Oh yeah, I know. There's literally, Howard Middle, and then that new elementary school that's somewhere over near the YMCA downtown.
So I don't know. To me, I always think about it like, because you have time in traffic, right? Like you bike to work most of the time, though, right?
Yeah, on the same streets Jeff's on.
Yeah, because you guys are, 5 minutes away from work technically without traffic?
10, 15 minutes, in case I'm in the office a little bit later than normal, Dan.
Mine's like 30 minutes in that case.
Really? No.
It's like 20.
That's actually interesting, because for me, it's like 35 on a good day, an hour 20 on a bad day. And I always think about it like, if there was a train that went to my area, I would take it every day.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think
I'm 4 miles away, but if I could just hop on like a light rail or something and just be at our building, since we're in the heart of downtown, like I would do that every day easily.
So would you move to a place near a train station or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on, how useful that rail system is. Our current rail system with Sunrail, it kind of goes from Sand Lake up to Lake Mary, and outside of, maybe like a weekend visit to downtown Winter Park, I don't really have any reason to use it.
Right. Well, because right now it just goes north and south. But the whole idea that I could just get so much more done during that commute, because for me, I'm like, that's an hour and a half to 2 hours out my day every day. For me, I'm like a train, anything like that. And that's why I was watching an interview with Marquise Brownlee and Elon Musk. He actually interviewed Elon Musk, which is actually very interesting.
Yeah, I saw that.
The whole idea of him trying to make electric cars, more cost efficient. Like the next car, I think, or a couple years from now, is going to be like 25,000 range, which is very economical. And for me, I would just think of autopilot. I don't think of like cost. I think of cost, obviously, but at the end of the day, I'm like autopilot. Yeah. That's what I want. That's what I need. But it's funny because I talk to a lot of people about Tesla, because I'm just a fan of the brand. And you can have your issues with Elon Musk if you want, but the brand itself, about the design, the function, how it wants to kind of disrupt the auto industry and kind of help the environment at the same time, all that stuff, it just makes sense to me. And I'm like, I could be more productive. I can take a nap if I wanted to. But people are like, I don't trust it. And that boggles my mind that people are like, I don't trust like self-driving cars.
From a cultural perspective, I can understand that. With automation within American workforce and industries has been happening over the past 30, 40 years, with a lot more in the past 10. But like, it takes a lot for people to see the value of automation at the forefront of it, because what you see is I just see robots doing it. And it's like, how can I trust the robot?
Yeah, and trust is really a good word for it, because if I'm not the one with, like, I trust myself, so if I've got my hands on the wheel, I know where that car is going. But once, like, I've never been in a self-driving car, but I imagine that hands-off
the first
thing
time,
where
it
steers itself for the first time is just...
I have, and it is trippy.
Yeah.
For the first time, you're like, I don't know, right? It's the unknown. But to your point, trust. We are a very errorless race. We make a lot of errors, our behavior, our emotion, those kind of things. So you're saying, I trust myself more than a machine. I trust the bus driver more than a machine. I trust the person next to me driving and myself more than two machines.
Yeah.
Who are you, my 6th grade math teacher?
I'm just saying, though, like, to me, it doesn't make sense because we are very chaotic creatures. And I think me and you talked about that before, right?
Yeah.
That we as humans just breed chaos, and our behavior is chaotic, and our decisions sometimes are, and we can't be as predictive all the time.
Yeah, and the solution's not to apply order to chaos, but to adapt to the chaos. And what self-driving cars do is, I guess, like, if you have a bunch of them, it is more ordered.
Right.
But they're able to adapt to trees falling or deers running in the road or the road collapsing in front of you. Their reaction times are just better, and it's more reactive in a chaotic world than we could ever hope to be.
I don't know the stat, but I'm almost positive majority of accidents on the road are because human behavior.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, all cars on the road right now are piloted by humans.
Yeah.
You
But
know?
I'm just saying, though, it could
It's
be
safer to
weather,
bike.
it could be mechanical sometimes, but majority of accidents most likely are human error at
Yeah.
that point. Take away that human error, like you said, you can't control chaos, but what you can do is exclude it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So-
Just put yourself in the best position to handle chaos when it comes up.
Right. So where I'm getting at and my mind is trying to wrap around it is we as humans just have this idea of we're arrogant and overconfident, and we have this superiority complex that our judgment and our assumptions are better than a machine or something that actually works on a solution. That's their job, right? So self-driving car, their entire job 24/7, 365 is to figure out patterns, manipulate data to get from point A to point B the safest and fastest. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, that's their job. You don't think about that on a regular basis. But for some reason, we trust Google Maps to get us to the destination the fastest. That's an algorithm at that point, right?
Yeah.
Why aren't you breaking out a map and be like, I don't believe it. Let me figure this out because I'm smarter than it. We don't do that. Well, most of us don't do that.
Not anymore, anyway.
Not anymore. But you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
power steering. When did we start trusting power steering?
You're wrong crowd, man.
Definitely wrong crowd. I need to bring.
I'm pretty sure
yeah,
power steering is about as old as I am.
Right. But you get the idea of these generational gaps of saying,
Yeah.
well, it's new, I don't trust it. But then we're kind of hypocrites to that because we trust like machine learning on a regular basis. We trust robots on a regular basis and don't even know it.
Hell, I mean, people are fine kind of leaving their lives to be scheduled by their phone assistants or artificial intelligence. People are perfectly fine with allowing, like you said, like, Google to calculate most optimal route, using current conditions and traffic and all that type of stuff. So,
Well, that's what I'm saying, though, is we as humans do that all the time, but
Yeah.
then we're hypocrites to say, well, I trust myself more, right? So, even in our jobs, we have a lot of assumptions, and I feel marketing advertisers and ad agencies, to be honest with you, are very arrogant to what we do. We know best. We're smarter, blah, 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 blah.
Well, we do and we are.
To be fair,
No,
okay,
I'm kidding.
Yeah. we should be experts in our said industry. Yes,
Yeah.
right.
I feel like the expertise is just familiarity with using those tools more often. It's not like you can just pitch me any product and I'll tell you exactly what audience that product is for. I just know how to find like the demographics and to find the interest on the product with the tools I have.
Right, but I'm saying so obviously the digital landscape and kind of the platforms that we utilize and the new technology coming out is more machine learning, data driven, right? So 10, 15, 20 years ago, even 30, 40 with Mad Men, it was all about assumptions on past surveying, personas, whatever that is.
I mean, hell,
right?
I'd say we're still in that
We
with majority of businesses, clients or otherwise that are reliant off of outdated methods or poorly constructed methods for gathering those types of information to get that data to make assumptions they need for their marketing.
And I agree with that because we see it all the time, right? And we even do it sometimes. We need to catch ourselves,
Yeah.
right? So we're like, oh, well, it's this customer. It's this profile. And to us, we need to backtrack and look at it and be like, is it really though? Who said that? Well, I did. Well, who are you? Like,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Who are we to determine this product or services customer from first glance, right? Obviously, if you have a lot of back data and you work with that client for a very long time, you have a lot of data to understand who the customer is from the data, right? And I think that's where I'm going is we assume the beginning. And we have a lot of assumptions to tailor down before we need to even tailor down, right? Mm-hmm. So we set up things, we set up audiences, we set up marketing campaigns, and we look at a product and be like, I think this specific profile and this specific persona is the target demo. Why do we do that so broad so quickly though in a campaign? Because we want to save money really quick because we don't want to go broad as much.
I think it kind of is an artifact from older advertising and marketing methodologies, including like Nielsen and Prism.
Right.
This whole idea that we can't really account for everybody's tastes, but at the very least we can pare them down into these bite-sized, very digestible types of audiences. So you're talking about your middle-aged women, 45 to 55, or something like that. What were some of those Prism audiences you remember we were looking at the other day?
They all have adorable names, like the Country Squires.
Yeah,
and
Country Squires.
The ex-urban boomerites.
I remember
Golden Age or something like that.
I remember seeing one where it's God's chosen people or something like that. And the whole concept behind that Prism audience was, it's kind of self-explanatory. Very rural, very religious folk.
And one, how humorous that is.
Yeah.
That's kind of how a lot of people in marketing still do it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And to be honest, we can go through documents and proposals and show that we do personas too. Like, I think all three of us actually talked about this before, is this whole idea of a profile and targeting a profile doesn't make sense anymore, right? When it comes
to a demographic, I feel like demographics have a certain sort of contributing factor in that, it helps you kind of ballpark, the type of person. So, the type of person who typically buys a home for the first time is not going to be 18 years old.
No, agreed. Agreed. You have a starting point, right?
Yeah.
So the profile is a starting point, which is fine. But we get too granular on that starting point, I feel.
Yeah.
Right? Well, we should be more granular on the interest and then be broader on the profile. So you're 25 to 35 years old for a first home. Mm-hmm. You most likely will be married but not have kids, or be looking to have kids, whatever that is, right? And be in Florida because you're a real estate firm in Florida, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. And that's the trouble with the personas we usually see coming from places like Prism, is that they're really good about drilling down onto the demographics in terms of geography and age and maybe even race or income, but there's no room for behavior in there. You can have an 18-year-old looking for their first house. They're an odd one out, but why not include them. As long as you're not targeting 18-year-olds in general, you're targeting only people looking to buy a house, then it might be 18-year-olds, it might be 65-year-olds.
If they hit all of your other qualifiers, if we're talking about home buying, it would be income, net worth, like those types of figures, the willingness or likeliness to move or buy, all those are contributing factors that we can create audiences out of on sites like Facebook and Google and stuff. But yeah, so simply assuming that no one this young could buy a house, while it's safe to assume that, you could be excluding yourself out of potential home buyers.
It's a holdover from traditional where it was safer to assume that because it was cheaper in the long run. But digital impressions are super cheap. So even if you spill a little bit over the edge, like it might be worth it in the long run. If that one 18-year-old conversion is thousands of dollars of commission, then go for it. You might spend an extra $2 or $5.
Right, but and I think it's interesting because I feel brands have the same misconception of how users are digesting their advertising now, right? So the whole YouTube thing about demonetization because a certain ad was on a certain piece of content, right? And the brand is like, I don't want it on that content. I'm like, well, that's your customer. Oh, no, my customer doesn't watch that. Based on our algorithm, they do.
He was
watching it, and that's why we showed it to him, right? So, but you're excluding it because that's not the profile. That's the interest. Like, I'm interested in X YouTuber, and I found it interesting, and then your ad came up, and that intrigued me, and now I know the brand and want to get engaged with the brand, but the brand is like, no, you don't fit into this box that I feel needs to be our customer, so I don't want to show my ad on that content because it's relation at that point, right? So the consumer is saying that my brand is now associated with that content, and we're like, I don't feel that though, right? I don't think that because now I'm chasing the consumer around saying, where are you at? And I want to get your attention. I'm not getting that piece of content's attention. I'm getting that individual's attention wherever they're at based on their interest.
Yeah, I think part of it comes from a brand safety, perspective, whereas like, Procter & Gamble doesn't want their ads to view on content with, a lot of swearing or, sexual suggestion or something like that, regardless of whether or not that fits their ideal customer for X. But at the same time, I feel like another part of it is that a lot of advertisers are simply following the pack into what the big boys are doing. When we talk about like adpocalypse on YouTube 1.0, 2.0, whatever 0.0 we're on right now, if any article is mentioning any company, it's going to be a Fortune 500 company that's spending with YouTube. They're not going to be mentioning all the other 70 to 80% of YouTube ad buyers out there who are all for smaller brands and stuff like that. Like, I never got polled on whether or not I cared about my ad content was being on X, Y, or Z content. Granted, that's more of a brand safety thing that's brought to attention to us by the client and whatnot. But I rewinding just a little bit, but
but is that right though? That's what I'm saying. Just because that's the status quo of big brand to think that way, that's like saying, well, I'm going to pull my ad from, Bill O'Reilly's show because of all the scandals. I'm like, well, in digital realm, we're not sponsoring or we're not putting our ad dollars on that specific piece of content.
So like when we're doing like retargeting, I guess would be like a really good easy example. If the users come to our site and they've already expressed interest, maybe they've gone 2 or 3 pages deep, or they filled out a form or something like that, and we put them into a retargeting audience. So we say, all right, follow that dude, and he goes bouncing around YouTube and he wanders onto InfoWars. Oh no, what now? It's like, well, that same guy who was just on your website, is now on InfoWars. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone here that I don't particularly care for Alex Jones. That being said, if he's going to help me make a sale, he's going to help me make a sale.
Well, that's your customer, though.
Yeah.
Your customer went on InfoWars. Your customer is digesting content and now is also interested in your product, but you're not excluding him because he doesn't fit in that box. So, like, to me, it's the whole idea of these assumptions that we make in marketing, and we are overly arrogant when it comes to our past results and how it fits into the future, right? So we overly think things based on pre-existing data of things that aren't even relevant to that specific campaign or product, right? We're like, well, I eat pizza, so that means that this is the audience. I'm like, okay, well, for me, it's kind of like self-driving cars. We sit there and we have the machines to basically tell us this is the best path to take. This is the machine learning the data of the audience on an ongoing basis and giving us better results. But we don't trust it in the beginning. We go very, very specific because that's what we think is best. And then it's not enough data usually to be like, okay, but this other group that you excluded is actually really, really good, but we're not targeting them at all because you thought we need to be this narrow in this profile, right? So a good example I think we talked about before is John here, Tyler here, and Carmen here. They're all the same age, around about. They're really old. So they're really old. They all have
Really
kids.
Really old for the listener is like, what?
40.
45.
38 to 41 here. So they're really old. And joking, but they're all the same profile, right? They all have kids. They all have kids in elementary, in high school.
Yeah, they live in the same area.
They all have around the same income. They all live in the same area. They all have very different interests, though. They all buy very different products. Mm-hmm. So for us, it makes sense to target the interest, right?
Yeah.
Or if you want to even go further down that, you and Carmen have very similar interests.
Yeah. Yeah, if I were, an algorithm,
right,
an advertising algorithm, I would put Carmen and I in a bucket,
Correct, because you would convert on, say, something Marvel, Star Wars
movie, just hipster shit.
Right. So Carmen's interested in that. So are you, but you guys are two different profiles.
Yeah, according to old world Nielsen type of methodology in establishing your audiences and demographics, that despite our similarities and interests, we're not the same according to those old rules.
Yeah, they have the audacity to put the 30 million people into 60 different buckets. It's like that. There's so much overlap in there, and where the algorithm really excels is that you can have an infinite number of buckets with 2 or 3 people in each one, and then you're kind of picking a bucket of buckets, and it's just the machine way of looking at it, and just removing that subjectivity is a lot more flexible. It's a lot more adaptive in a chaotic world where you have 18-year-olds buying houses, you have 65-year-olds having their first kids, and just anything goes at this point. And I feel like the computer, it doesn't get caught up on that. It's able to keep rolling through it. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that marketing personas are a little outdated at this point. I feel like it's important to distinguish the content personas, though. So a persona, especially like a Nielsen persona, on the content side is probably a lot more useful than we're giving credit to, because at that point the right tone and the right messaging and a way to empathize with their audience and to get them to engage with the message of your brand and to make sure that they associate it in a positive light.
Oh, agreed. And I think the persona is the profile, though, right? And the interests you're picking and choosing at that point, though, right? So it's like a family with kids that are young and in Florida. That's a very, very broad demo.
Yeah,
still.
But messaging should be broad. So
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, if your product's good for families, then in general, making assumptions, you can guess what the pain points of a young family is, and if they're in a starter home or in their new home, or why do we keep coming back to homes?
I don't know.
It's really easy to talk about.
Marketing homes is where demographics really come into play.
Apparently. But so for me, it's like give a broad profile, right? If it's a family in Florida with young kids, fine. Put it out there, right? 3 million people. Out of that 3 million people, you're going to see who converts. The algorithm is going to tell you these types of people are converting. Now we're going to go back to the brand aspect of it and start promoting first touch points or the brand awareness part of a campaign and saying these people are the people that convert. We're going to start showing it to more of those types of people, lookalikes, whatever you want to call it. And now it's still going to spend your money more wisely because it's going to say we're not going to exclude everyone else, but we're going to maximize this profile that we know converted and we know is working well, regardless of whatever you think is the profile. It's saying this is the profile, so we're going to build more on that and expand the reach to those types of people so it can convert better. But for us, it's like self-driving cars. It really is. It's like we are very hesitant to let go of that steering wheel, right? Like I think even you said it. You're like, well, it's hard for me not to get a little too granular and go a little more broad and trust the algorithm's going to do its job. But
yeah, because you don't want to waste money on impressions.
But is it?
Probably not. But it's a fear you have to overcome.
Well, stop me if we're getting too in the weeds here. So, like, when it comes to setting up your campaigns, in AdWords, in Facebook, whatever platform you're going on, there still are assumptions you have to make. So, like, if we're targeting all parents in Florida, with kids, then we don't really have any additional information to pull from that without also asking a series of sub-questions and sub-assumptions that we need to do. So we create an audience of, single parents. We create an audience of, families with 1 kid or 2 kids or high school age kids versus toddlers and stuff like that. And so we segment the audience like that, making assumptions about that broadest category. So as the campaign performs, we can narrow down effectively what is working. But without that front legwork to come up with the broad assumption and then the sub assumptions, I don't know if that's a word or if there's a word for that, but to help us optimize the campaigns, make sure that we're targeting the people that we need to.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It's like the difference between targeting these specific demographics and just observing these specific demographics and how they are engaging with our ads. And that's a little more manual control, just to make sure the car is going to the right destination, I guess is a good analogy, because you can see if people outside of what you thought your audience would be are engaging with the content, and then maybe your content's off, or maybe your assumptions were off. You have to reevaluate something there.
But I think that goes to my point is if you get too targeted in the beginning, then how do you optimize? What's optimizing at that point? If you're like, shooting a sniper rifle and not saying what, oh, I missed it. Well, how do you hit it? I don't know. I just missed it.
Well, I think it comes down to the overall intention behind the message, the intention behind what you're trying to get the user to do, and the intention of the user themselves.
It's not on those lines, but I just thought of a good analogy randomly.
No, go for it. Shoot it. Edit it out. Cut it out.
How does this sound? Okay, so there's a dartboard, and you're going for the bullseye, right? You're always going for bullseye.
Yeah.
And this is like from the sniper rifle
that's
thing.
not how you play darts, but okay.
Are you going for 3 times 20? What is it?
No, it's the number. Okay, go ahead. Sure. Bullseye.
What do you go for?
Bullseye.
How do you play darts?
All right.
What is sports? I'm not good at them. So, okay, let's imagine there's a circle and you're trying to hit the center.
like a bullseye?
Target. Like a bullseye. Like a target.
So if you remove the whole board except for the bullseye, then you're almost always going to miss completely.
Correct.
But if there's a board there, you can
You
at
can
least
gauge
get close.
it. That's what I'm saying. It's
you can get closer,
same idea.
and then you figure out where you need to adjust your shooting each time.
Right. Okay. I used the wrong analogy. Then that was actually the correct one because I did more of a shotgun approach and then be a sniper, but should be wider target, understand where you missed, and then you can zoom in a little bit.
If you're
more.
shooting fish in a barrel, would you rather have 30 million fish in there? I keep going to that number. I think it's the population of Florida. 30 million fish in a barrel, or like 500 fish in a barrel that are married women over 50 with 3.5 kids and also like HBO.
Those are very old fish, by the way. But yeah, no, it's the same idea. It's like I said, it comes down to agencies and advertisers just being overly arrogant about what we do, and you hear it all the time. And I can admit to this, that we project it sometimes. They're like, oh, we know better, and we become even think we're smarter than the machine, right? Like you said it, you're like, I don't know if I can let go of the steering wheel. Even when it comes to targeting, even when it comes to optimization or auto optimization and making the campaign better, I see the results. I still don't trust it.
Yeah. So what would your advice be for advertisers that are maybe afraid to, maybe they have a smaller budget and they're looking at like $50 a month or something, and like how do they spend that wisely if they're not slimming down their audience way too much?
I would say understand budget allocation and not a month-to-month thing. So it wouldn't be $50 a month. It'll be maybe let's spend $150 in the beginning to collect more data and really understand what is going on. Because $50, first of all, we're speaking very, very micro at this point. But $50 is not going to get you enough data
it's
to understand what is going on and who your customer really is about conversions, right? But the more you spend up front, the more you can really learn in the back end to be like, okay, this is the sweet spot. This is where we need to be. Now we could save a ton of money doing that instead of going the opposite way and saying, let's get really, really focused, and I might be missing a lot. But by doing that, that's why I say the arrogance and like the over like confidence that we have to say, I really think it's this one. Nope, that's not it. Oh, shoot this way. Nope, that's not it. Let's shoot that way. Nope, that's not it either. Or I got one here. I'm a genius. Like, it's not that way. It's like we're working too hard for no reason. Just broaden it, and it will automatically get better.
Yeah,
without you doing anything.
I support the experimental phase concept of doing any new advertising for any new product line or any new audience. You're going to be spending a few $100s just to get some data and just to figure out what you're working with and where your audience really is. Like
I said, I think clients and even I think a lot of agencies project this idea that digital equals automatic results. Like, spend money, I should see results in the first month. I'm like, if it is our first relationship, that's not how it's going to work, right? It shouldn't be like that. It's an ongoing thing. And the more data we have, the more we can learn. That's not data that we collected. It's the data that the machine collected, figured it out a little bit for us, and for us to dissect, to really understand what's going on while we're working together with it, right? So it's a partnership when it comes to machine learning and understanding how to utilize it to be the most efficient for us.
Yeah,
like we kind of go against it for some reason, and it's actually hurting us because we're like, oh, well, I know how it works, but I'm not letting go of that steering wheel.